Hi everybody, welcome to a question and answer session specifically for children this week. So we've asked you all to send in some great questions, and you have done. You've not disappointed me. Some of them have really stumped me this time. Unfortunately, we've been so lucky with the weather up to now for these question and answers, and it's raining today. So we've come into my parents' garage, and we're going to hide away from the rain for a bit and do this while we can't get on with any other work. So we're going to crack on with the questions. You've sent in quite a few, and each person sent in quite a few questions with each sort of under one question. So I'm going to try my best to answer them in a logical order, and we'll take it from there. So okay, we'll get on with the first question. Question 1 comes from Sophia, and she's asked, how do cacti produce seed? And it's a really good question because you don't really think of cacti producing seed or flowers even. You think of them producing little baby cacti around the outside. So it's a really good question, and they just produce flowers like all other plants. Cacti have grown to adapt to the very hot conditions of growing in places like deserts, and so they don't flower very often, but when they do, they have really beautiful, often kind of light coloured flowers, pinky white, those kind of colours, but other colours as well. And little insects, bees, butterflies, those kind of things pollinate them, and then they just produce seed, and they're often very, very tiny, the seeds, almost like dust. So you can buy packets of cacti seeds, and you can have a go at growing them yourselves. So I hope that answers your question. It is a really good question, a really great first question. So thank you very much, Sophia. Question 2 comes from Charlie, who's 7, and he says I have a jade plant that he bought himself, and he wants to know which window and how far away into the house he needs to put it. And then his mum has said that they have an east front window, 2 lower, and 1 window that's south-southeast facing, and a west facing back window. So a jade plant is another name for what I would know as a money plant or a money tree. They're beautiful sort of succulent plants that grow really well indoors. They come from South Africa and Mozambique. They're really beautiful, and they get sort of thick waxy leaves. They're quite fat when they're sort of nice and watered, and they can get really lovely white sort of star-shaped flowers. So they're a really nice plant to grow, really good choice. They should grow quite happily. They need full sun, and even it's deceptive when you sit by a window. It can feel really hot, but the plants really need to be right by the window. That kind of plant, the kind of cacti succulents. So you need to stick it right by the window if you can, on the windowsill. Make sure you put a little tray underneath it to catch the water, maybe with some stones in so it doesn't get too wet. And then if you can get it sort of south facing, south or west facing would be the best. So your south east might be your best bet, I would have thought. Or west, yeah, west facing back windows probably would be your best bet. Stick it quite close to the window, as close as you can, and make sure you just turn the pot a little bit, maybe every couple of days, maybe once a week. Just turn it slightly, it doesn't have to be fully round, and that means that all of the leaves get enough light, because the window glass cuts out quite a lot of the goodness out of the sunlight. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Okay, question 3 comes from Mia and Aoife, and they've asked, so Mia's asked, how do you get a tree stump out? So it's a great question, and the answer is you use a lot of backache and your muscles to get it out. So you need to dig a hole right the way round, like a trench, all the way around the tree stump, and try and cut any of those roots that you can. Dig right underneath the stump if you can, or at least wiggle it back and forth with a spade, and that should hopefully get it out. If it's really big, you can hire something called a stump grinder. Well, you probably need your parents to hire it for you, and that has sort of bolts on it, and it spins around really fast, and it chews up the old stump, and that will dig it out, and then you can clear away all the sort of wood chip, and then that should get rid of it. But obviously if you can dig it out, it means it gets it all out, and then you can plant something else in the place. So I hope that answers that question. And then Aoife has asked, how do you get dead grass alive again? So if it's really dead, I'm afraid there's nothing else you can do for it. You have to take it out. So you can either sort of scrape it out with a rake or cut it off with a spade, and then you can either put fresh grass seed down or turf down. If it isn't really dead, if it's just a bit poorly, you can give it lots more water. Grass likes a lot of water, and you can just give it a little. You could give it a little bit of a feed, but really you best just let it be and just sort of let it have a bit of water and a bit of sunlight. It might be that you've put a trampoline over it or a paddling pool, and it might have gone all yellow. It looks like it's dying, but actually it won't be dead. It just needs to get the good sunlight to it, and then it'll start growing again. So depends how dead it is the answer to that. So if you want to send me a picture of it, I'll answer, but I'll be able to tell you if it's properly dead or not. So, and then as a follow-up question, you both asked, why can our daddy only grow weeds? And I think the problem is he's not putting enough time and effort into it, and he probably doesn't know which ones are the weeds. So maybe for Father's Day or his birthday, you could buy him a gardening book on what plants are weeds. But if he's good at growing them, maybe he could corner the market in growing weeds. Maybe there's a demand for weeds out there. You could grow dandelions and burdock, and then you could have dandelion and burdock drinks. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Question 4 has come from Will and Rory. You've asked some great questions, both of you. So Will's first question is, why are carrots orange? And it's a great question. It's one of my favourite questions I've ever been asked, because it seems like it's a simple question, and actually there's a lot of hidden information in the back there. So carrots have always been popular. They've been grown since earlier than Roman times. They've always been something that we've eaten, lovely and sweet and juicy. And originally, up until you can still buy a real range of colours. They don't have to be orange. They can be purple, black, white, red, and orange, obviously. So you can get all sorts of different colours. It's just that orange has become the most popular, and that stems from around the sort of 17th century, so about 300 years ago, when Dutch growers started to grow more orange carrots because that was their national colour. So there's somebody called William of Orange, so you can look all this up online, but there was somebody called William of Orange who was in charge at the time, and it was seen as a sort of popular colour for the country, so they grew more orange carrots. And it's just become the popular carrot of everybody. So almost everywhere you go in the world, people do eat more orange carrots than anything else. They're quite easy to grow, they seem to be disease resistant, but they've just become the most popular one. So the reason they're orange is because they are. So you can get them in other colours, but it's just that orange is the most popular. So I hope that answers your question. So question 2, he's also asked, why are peppers different colours? So again, great question, and there's a sort of simple answer, is that it could just be the different varieties. So people grow chili peppers, and they can be all sorts of different colours, and they're just the different varieties. But the bell peppers that you might eat at home, that you often eat raw and dip in hummus and things like that, they tend to be green, yellow, or red, or orange maybe in the middle. And that's more to do with how ripe they are. So when you buy a green one, that's been left on the plant for the least time. So it's grown, it's kind of got ready, but it's not quite got to being completely ripe yet. Whereas the red ones, they're fully ripe, they're ready, they're absolutely ready to go. And the orange ones or the yellow ones, they're in the middle. So that's why they're different colours. So I hope that answers your question. You then asked, what seeds grow the biggest tree? So I'm going to answer this in 2 parts. So the biggest trees you can get are the giant sequoias, and they grow mostly in America, and they do grow to be absolutely ginormous. I had to check it how big they grow. So they can grow up to 250 feet tall, so that's 76 metres. So I'm nearly 2 feet tall, no, 6 feet tall, sorry. So imagine how many of me, 250 feet, if that's huge, isn't it? Massive. So they grow to be the biggest, tallest trees in the world, but their seeds are tiny. They grow in what we would think of looking like a bit like a pine cone, and the seeds that come out are very small, quite dust-like. So from tiny, tiny little bits, they grow up to be the biggest trees in the world. And this biggest seed in the world, that grows to be a palm tree, which does get quite big, nowhere near as big as the sequoias. But that grows to be about 1 foot across. So the seed itself, not the tree, the seed, is about that size. And you can go to a museum in Liverpool and they have one. You can't find them in very many places because they're protected. They come from the Seychelles and they are protected. But the museum in Liverpool has one, and it's funny because it looks a bit like a bottom. So you can go and find it in their plant and seed room, and it's really big. It's about that sort of size, and it does look a bit like a bum. So that's the biggest seed. It grows a tall plant, but that's the biggest seed that you can get, and they're designed to float on the ocean to get to other different islands, a bit like a coconut is. So that's the biggest seed. So I hope that answers your question. And then finally, Will, you've asked, when do we pull up our beetroot? And the answer to that is it depends how you like them. So a lot of people think that the perfect size for a beetroot is when it gets to about golf ball size. So that will have had a chance to grow and get some good energy inside it and good to store some sugars for next year, but not got so big that it's got kind of woody. So that would be about the perfect time. So you could try just picking one out. You could just try moving, it depends if you're growing it in the soil or in the compost in a pot. You could try just moving the soil around the top of it and just see how big you think it looks on one of them, and the rest should be about the same. So you could try and you could see which ones you like the best, but they're probably going to be quite tasty whenever you pull them up anyway, so just have a go, pull one out. If it's about the right size, try it, and then you can see if you want to leave the others a bit longer or you want to harvest them all. So I hope that answers your question. And then your brother Rory, has asked the question, why do our plants have holes in the leaves? So, and I'm afraid the answer to that one is that it could be lots of different things like eating leaves, including ourselves. We eat lettuce and things like that, and that's just the same, we enjoy eating them. It's probably caterpillars, but it could be slugs, snails, it could be birds pecking at them, it could be your brother pecking at them, he could be going out and just nibbling the sides of them, lots of things eat them. So what I would do is go out just before bedtime, when it's getting a bit dark, on a cooler evening, and go and turn over the leaves and have a look at on the top as well, but on the underside. And often you might see something, just having a little munch of the leaves, and then you'll be able to work it out. And with those you can just, if you don't want them eating it, you can just pick them off, and then you can either leave them for birds to eat. If you put them in a little pile on a bird table, birds will come and eat them. Or you could throw them into the neighbour's garden, but you probably shouldn't do that. Or you could put them into the green bin, maybe that might be the best option. So I hope that answers all of your questions. Thank you very much for them. So question 5 comes from Ruby, and she's sent in some great questions. She's sent in quite a few, so we'll work through them again. So she's asked, what are the best plants for bees? And the real answer to that is that it's good to plant a variety. So if you had just one type of plant in your garden, that might be really good for the bees for a short period, but really before and after, they might not be very happy. So it's really good to grow a variety of things and to look out for very simple flowers. So flowers that don't have lots of extra bits of petals and leaves and bits sticking out. Go for really nice simple flowers, and the bees can get to them nice and easily. So there's lots of plants they really do like. They love lavender, they love buddleia, they love things like dahlias, foxgloves. There's all sorts of different ones like that they really love. But as I said, it's good to grow a variety. And plants like ivy, that some people see as a bit of a pest in the garden, they actually have flowers much later on into the year. And things like bees, but also wasps, which I know you might not be very keen on, but are good for the garden. They really like those because they're flowering much later on, so lots of the summer sort of stuff is finished. And then a plant like ivy might be flowering sort of into kind of October, November time, so that's a really good one. So I hope that answers your question. You then asked, how do you get rid of bugs, aphids and ants from your plants? And you're specifically talking about the apple tree saplings in the garden. And when you plant a new plant like an apple tree sapling, the new growth, the stems and leaves is all lovely and fresh and juicy. And aphids use their long tongue that's just like a needle, and they sort of stick it into that new growth. It's nice and easy for them to stick it in and start sucking all that good sugary goodness that's coming up from the roots. And they love that. It's perfect for them. It's just what they want. So in some ways you've planted something that the aphids love, so it's difficult to stop them in some ways. You can try taking them off. So you can just use your finger and just rub them off, and they'll just come off with your hand. You can spray them with your hose pipe, and if you use a mixture of washing up liquid, just ordinary washing up liquid from the kitchen, mix that in with water, not too much of it, but just a little bit of it, and spray that on with a spray can. That will help wash them off, because it's like being on an ice rink for them. They kind of go like and fall off. So that works. You can spray them with sprays, but I try that first. But what will happen is probably the tree will survive these couple of years. You'll see lots of aphids, and as it gets to be a much bigger tree, which it will do, that it'll stop being such a problem. So I wouldn't worry too much. The other thing you can do is to encourage things like ladybirds, and the ladybird larvae. So when they're babies, the ladybirds, they love eating aphids. So you can sort of try and encourage ladybirds into your garden by leaving a few piles of twigs around and things like that, and they'll come in and start eating them. And some birds eat them as well, so if you put out a bird feeder, you might help to encourage some birds to come and eat the aphids. And the reason that you're seeing the ants on the tree with the aphids, they're not really causing any harm. What they're doing is collecting, and it's a bit disgusting, but the aphids, when they suck all the sap out, they then poo out sort of like sticky stuff that's a bit like honey, and the ants love eating it. So they kind of farm the aphids. So they look after them and they keep predators away. So if the ants see some ladybird babies coming to eat them, the ants actually move the ladybird babies away. So the ants aren't a problem as such, they're just there because the aphids are there. So if you can wash off the aphids, you won't then see ants. So I hope that helps. You then asked, how can you get your apple tree, when it's not covered in aphids, to grow more apples? So the secret to getting more apples is to really prune it correctly, and it's quite a skilled job, so you need your mummy and daddy to just help you do it. You look it up online and to prune it properly, and then you get the best apples from it. And then it depends what you want. If you want lots of little apples, you just let it flower and then leave it alone. But if you want some nice big juicy apples, you need to sort of thin out how many apples there are. The tree will produce lots and lots, because what it wants to do is just get lots of seeds out. It's not too worried about making big juicy apples that we like. So if you take off some of those littler apples, it'll put all of its energy into some nice big juicy ones. So I hope that answers that question. And then you've asked, why aren't our tomatoes going red? So it's quite common at this time of year, and it's all to do with sunlight. So unless you've bought a variety of apples that don't go red, so that'd be worth just double checking that the packet that you bought wasn't yellow or tiger striped or something like that. But assuming that they are supposed to be red, it's to do with the sunlight. So if there's anything shading your tomato plants, so if it's underneath a big tree or something like that, or by a fence, and you can move it into the sunshine, and that'll really help it. If you can't move it, next year when you do grow them, plant them in full sun. They really love being in sunshine. So that's why they're not turning red. But if they are in full sun and they're still not turning red, let them be, and they will turn red eventually. We've not had a great summer this year, so that's possibly why. So I hope that answers that question. And then finally, you've asked, what keeps eating our sunflowers, and how do we protect it? And then your mum said, every time it starts to grow a flower, it's munched. So I would guess this is probably slug and snail damage. It could be that it just double check when it's been damaged, that it's not the wind that's done it, because sometimes because they're so big with the flowers, they actually just get snapped off. So just check it's not actually all the damage that's causing it, but assuming it looks like it's been eaten rather than broken, it's probably slugs and snails. And again, you just need to go out sort of late evening, just before bedtime, and go around, particularly on a sort of damp night, go around with a torch if it's dark, and you'll see loads and loads of slugs and snails around. Pick them up, wear a pair of gloves if you're squeamish, and as I said, throw them into your neighbour's garden, put them out for the birds to eat, the birds will eat them. And again, you can try and encourage things like hedgehogs into your garden and birds like that, things like birds, and they will eat the slugs and snails rather than you having to go out and pick them. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.